Reader, hey, come closer. I thought it was time for a little bit of a chatty informer type of video, and I was actually kind of practicing it in terms of like what would I want to say about this topic, when I was just like, you know what, let me just film it. Because it's an informal type of discussion. If I don't find myself finding the words correctly or whatever, that's kind of the point about this one, for this to just be me blabbering basically, so hopefully I don't ramble on for too long. But so basically I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about my TBR reduction goal for 2026, because I never really made a TBR goal or a goals video for 2026, nor have I actually formally written down any goals for myself neither. But having come to more like closer to the midway point of the year, I feel like now is a good time to kind of naturally see where my reading behavior is leaning towards. And it is a little bit formal to see it as like a 2026 goal, because I do think that just in general I always kind of see where my behavior is kind of moving towards, and so seeing it in terms of like the period of 1 year is just a little bit artificial, but that's it's fun as well, so let's look at it that way. So I went into 2026 with a TBR that was under 20, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have the number hopefully on the screen. Normally I should have it because I film a TBR card update every 3 months, so I should have the number that I went into January with from that video. But so it was under 20, I'm pretty sure of that. It might have just been 19 actually, but it was definitely under 20. And I had not necessarily set myself very strong goals when it comes to the reduction that I wanted to make, but I do feel like I went into 2026 feeling like that 19 was a little bit on the upper end of what was comfortable to me, and like having a wish to reduce it further, right? I have definitely had some intentions and some efforts placed into reducing the TBR towards the end of 2025. However, of course, that was also knowing that Christmas would be one of the final days of 2025, and that would add books into the count. And so I, in the end, was just like, okay, I want to keep it under 20, and so, you know, I'm going to go to London one of the final days of 2025. I want to be able to buy myself a book there, but I'll just be happy with under 20. However, going into 2026, the TBR was not really reducing naturally. The first few months of the year, the TBR was just steadily climbing, I feel like, and I think, like, I don't know, at the end of March maybe even still, the TBR was probably at its highest and was getting uncomfortably close to 30. I think somewhere in that month, or maybe even in the month before that, it was actually really at like 29. I don't think it was ever that close at the end of a month, but definitely there have been times throughout the first 4 months of the year in which the TBR was that close to reaching that 30 number. And that 30 for me is a little bit of an alarm signal. In one of the previous TBR Zero projects that I've done in years past, I kind of came to the conclusion that 30 would be like doable for me within like a year. And that is not to say that I can only read 30 books in a year, because that's definitely not the case. I tend to actually read over 100 books every single year. However, those 100 books are not 100 physical books that I own, or they don't correspond to the 100 physical books that I would potentially actually own. And I think that there definitely is a difference between reading 100 books and reading the 100 books that you have on your TBR card at one particular point in time. And I see this time and time again when I see people do TBR Zero projects, right? There are some who really go full on in and say like, I cannot make any sort of purchase, but I actually personally on my end think that, at least for me, that is just a big mistake, okay? That's not sustainable. That's gonna kill my motivation at some point in time, okay? So the majority of people are still buying books when they're doing these TBR Zero projects, and I feel like you kind of need them as well. Sometimes you need a fresh input into your TBR. You need something to freshen up the offer, but also just because there are certain things that you might naturally gravitate towards on your TBR card, the easier reads or the ones that you're more excited about, and the danger exists in then being left with like the remainders, the ones that you've kind of lost interest in or you don't really fully remember why they're on your TBR card because they've been there for a while, right? So when I think of starting off with 30 books at the beginning of the year, that being feasible for a 1-year period, then I'm taking into account the fact that I will be reading books that are not on my physical TBR. There will be readathons that I'll want to participate in, for which the books on my TBR are not, like not all books on my TBR would be able to fill those prompts. There will be read-alongs happening that I will want to take part in, and if I don't allow these exceptions for myself, I'll just feel like boxed in, imprisoned by the rules of my TBR game, right? I will just naturally be very interested in something that I see pass by in a YouTube video, on social media, in the bookstore, and the idea of not being allowed to pick that up because of this TBR 0 project and to have to wait like 8 months or what until the project is done, that's just not gonna work. That be the reality, okay? I'm not that strong, and most people who are doing these TBR 0 projects are not that strong. And that is where TBR 0 projects go to die, is setting up these very strict rules for yourselves, and you know, not allowing a little bit of a slip every once in a while, a little bit of a correction every once in a while. But so for me, based off of the 2 TBR 0 projects that I've done, I feel like 30 books, that is something I could realistically say I can get rid of within a 1-year time period, right? But that being said, I started this year with 19 books on the TBR. I am currently at 25 books on the TBR, right? Now, granted, I was not doing a 0 TBR project, okay, so I should not make that comparison at all. But in any case, when my TBR grew closer to 30, that is kind of when I want to reduce the TBR, that's kind of when I want to reduce the TBR part of my brain just put on its alerts and was like, hold on. You said at 19 books that you wanted to reduce the TBR, and we are now almost at 30 in just a few months' time. So I definitely think that in the month of May, definitely, I have put in not necessarily strict action, but the idea is definitely front and center in my mind of wanting to reduce. And so at the moment, that means that I'm more conscious of what is entering. In the first half of the year, I have pre-ordered a lot more than I did before, and I'm very happy for that. I'm very excited about the books that are coming in. I have had some really great reads already from books that I've pre-ordered, but I also have the SFF subscription that is bringing in 1 book every month, and I'm very happy that I currently don't have the fantasy subscription coming in, and I'm waiting for the announcements for the next trilogy that they will be doing so that I can formally get off of the fantasy subscription, because yeah, I think pre-orders on top of 1 or 2 books, so in the first 3 months of the year it was 2 books that were automatically coming in like that, added to the TBR is just too much, you know. I cannot naturally keep the TBR down when it comes to that much coming in. And so definitely in the month of April there was like a 1 book reduction, and in the month of May now there will be 2 or 3 books depending if I can still finish 1. But so I definitely think that I am taking this goal more seriously now. I definitely feel like in the last 2 months my attention has been more on sort of like, no, don't get this book now, and on like, okay, make sure you also get some physical reading into your months. Make sure to also prioritize some of these books, because I'm definitely excited about some of them at least. And that will be the sort of like feeling that goes into July definitely, and that will be the feeling that still will go into the month of June. I expect very much still the month of July and August as well, and we'll see from there. But currently I'm taking this TBR reduction goal slowly. You know, I am not setting myself the grand goal of like, ooh, let's get to 10 by the end of 2026, for example. Currently, I'm just focusing on getting under 20. That's my next goal in mind. Getting back to 25 was the goal that I was looking at for the past few weeks, for example. In my Notion table, basically, it can show 25 entries without me having to press the load more button. So this was a very nice sort of like goal in that sense of really being confronted with the fact that you weren't there every time that I was like opening that page on Notion and having to click the load more button to see like the most recent book that had been added to the TBR. And interestingly enough as well, actually, I just realized today that I've added 25 books to the TBR this year thus far. And so I have 25 books left at this point in time. So if we're gonna oversimplify things, that would mean that if I hadn't bought those 25 books, I would be at TBR 0 now. But that is absolutely an oversimplification because I do have 10 books on here still from 2025. But so yeah, I am definitely planning to reduce this TBR. Next goal is getting under 20. Whether I do that in June, whether I do that in July, whether I do that in August, I don't necessarily care. My birthday is coming up. I don't have my wish list up and I will not have my wish list up, but I do still expect books to find their way to me. I'm going on multiple trips. On a trip I tend to want to pick up a book, especially if I'm going to an English-speaking country, and in August I'm going to London, the most dangerous place in the world for my TBR. So there will be books added. So it is definitely very much possible that I will not get under 20 until maybe even October. Who knows? Maybe my October self will look back upon this video and be like, oh, sweet summer child. But that is the sort of like next point in my vision of where do I want to see my TBR. Will I want to go further than that? Probably, but that is not really on my radar right now. You know, I don't want to be focusing on a lofty big goal to get down to. I just want to take it like bite-sized portions at a time. So the next milestone to strive towards is getting that TBR back to under 20. So we get back to the point where we were at the beginning of 2026, and then the next one I guess would actually be to get rid of the books that I had read, that I had purchased or been gifted in 2025. As I said, there are 10 left of those. I currently am fine when it comes to the timeline of the books. I think the first book that needs to be read from those needs to be read by August. So in that sense, we're definitely fine. But yeah, I wouldn't mind kind of trying to mentally prioritize some of those in the next few months, because in December I need to have read Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, which is a massive book that I've definitely been procrastinating on. But so yes, that is the TBR reduction goal. I don't actually have the plan to go to TBR 0, but I do actually have a fun idea in mind for when I hit a specific number. And I don't know, guys, I don't know whether this project is ever gonna happen. I was very excited about it when I came up with it, but then my TBR just kept on growing and it just became more and more unfeasible for me to do it anytime soon. So I don't know whether I would actually end up making that video at one point or another or not. And that would actually result in me getting a 0 TBR at the end. But it's definitely not sort of like my primary goal, you know. I have enjoyed the TBR 0 processes to some extent. Whenever I've done it, I've mainly really enjoyed the content creation of TBR 0 related content, but it isn't like the idea of having 10 books is somehow less to me compared to the idea of having 0, you know? I don't feel at this point in time like I need to go to 0 to, you know, start clean, because the first time that I did a TBR 0 project, for example, that very much was the case. The first time I had a very big TBR, the first step that I did in my TBR 0 journey was actually just getting rid of a ton of books without even having read them. Just being like, okay, realistically speaking, I don't want to be spending my energies in this TBR 0 project on these particular books, because at this point in time, I'm not sure whether I would put them back in, like whether I would purchase them again. But at that point in time, that was basically what was guiding my TBR 0 project, was the sort of feeling of like, I've got all these books here. Half of them I don't fully even like I remember why they're on that TBR, but I don't fully agree with them being there anymore. These don't spark joy. I'm ready to want to like pick up a book the moment that I've purchased it and not feel guilty about all the rest of the books that are still left on my shelves. And so then it was really sort of like this hard reset, right? I'm gonna get down to 0 so that I don't have to feel guilty about the fact that I haven't gotten to all those books that I do still want to get to, but that I can at that point in time start afresh. And then the second Zero TBR was sort of like, how did it explode again in such a short period of time? I need another reset, right? But I think in the meantime, what I've definitely learned more than I had learned after the first Zero TBR is to just allow myself to pick up a book that I've just purchased, you know. I don't need to be going through my books in order of how long they've been on my shelves, and just as long as for me personally this is just something that I like, if I just keep in mind the 1-year deadline, then, you know, for the rest it can stay on there until it's like 1 month due. Okay, it's not my preference. Preferably I would naturally get to it before the 1-year time period, for example, but it's also like, it's not a disaster if the reason why I at some point prioritize a book is because it's about to be 1 year on my TBR and I've told myself that I'm not going to do that. And that is just a rule that I like, because I like knowing that everything on my TBR is relatively new and having this sort of like safety measure in place to avoid something just lingering forever on the shelves, because it's like never the top priority. But I've definitely allowed myself many a time throughout this past few months, even at the end of 2025 I'm talking about then, to just pick up something that I've purchased very, very recently over something that maybe was an intention for me that month, at the beginning of the month. And we can talk about that in terms of May, for example, because May is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the US, and it is also the month in which we do Asian Readathon, in which we try to read books by Asian authors. Now, I have never been a strict follower of this readathon, as in like I love Asian fantasy, so I read it all throughout the year, so I have never really spent a ton of effort on prioritizing it in the month of May, for example. But because of Herkiat, I am doing Heritage Months in their correct orders. And so for May I was like, oh, that's perfect, because there's this book that came out in March that I absolutely wanted to read the moment I got it. Did I? No. There's a book coming out in May that I absolutely want to read, and you know, that arrived early on my doorsteps as well, so I was like, yeah, okay, perfect, Asian Readathon, I'm gonna prioritize these 2 books. And then a book came in by an Asian American author that I knew I was gonna get, and I was actually really not that excited about the book ahead of time. But I don't know whether it was just seeing the beautiful cover, I don't know whether it was knowing that somebody who I follow also got that book, whether it was just reading the back, I don't even know, but somehow the itch grew to prioritize that over these other 2 books that I had been dying to pick up. Like 2 of my big, like most anticipated releases, and I did, and I'm very happy with that behavior, okay? Like, post having read that book, me, to some extent is like, why didn't you just stick to the plan? Because now I still haven't read these other 2 books that I absolutely want to read, but I actually find this to be very positive behavior on my side, and behavior that I want to entice, induce, promote. And so with that in mind, I don't feel the need at this point in time to go back to 0, for example, because I'm already allowing this behavior, I'm already exhibiting this behavior, even when the TBR is higher than I want it to be at this point in time. So I just want to get the TBR down a little bit, so that yes, we can keep on doing what we're already doing, which is when I'm really excited about a book, prioritizing it and just getting to it immediately, but also having it be the case that the ones that then have to kind of slip by the wayside are not like a massive pile that then can potentially linger for like 11 months until I finally get to it. So that is basically the main thing. I want to be able to pick up the books that I want to pick up in the moment that I want to be picking them up. I'm already doing so, but I feel like I can best do that with just a little bit fewer books on the TBR, because I feel like when we're talking about people who are defending the idea of owning a large collection of books so that you always have something on hand for the mood that you're in, that just doesn't really work for me. I feel like I am much more likely just kind of lose my interest in certain books the longer that they are on this cart, versus being stuck in a situation where I don't know what to pick up. You know, I don't think I've had that situation. I've had that situation in the sense of there's so much I want to pick up, what am I going to pick up next? But I don't think I've had a situation where it's been like, oh, I would really like to pick up like a horror, and I don't know, and I don't have any to pick up, because even if I don't physically own them, I can always listen to one, I can always download an ebook in a moment, I can order it and have it the next day, you know. So I don't think that that is a reality for me, and so I would rather just have a smaller number, so that yes, we will automatically gravitate certain newer stuff, or something will come in and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna read it immediately, but the back catalog that I still have then is small enough so that, you know, those are also books that I really want to read, and then they can just be read a little bit later, but still very early on when my excitement for them is the biggest. So yeah, this was my rambly video. Can you recognize yourself in this, or are you somebody who actually does have that sort of want for a big library of potential, one day I'll read these books? Because that's definitely a viewpoint that I used to have, and that I find interesting to compare to my viewpoint. But just for me personally, it doesn't really work all that well anymore. And so yeah, if you are on a TBR 0 journey, which I know some of you are, then yeah, let me know how you're doing with it, and you know, whether you have experienced that same sort of frustration at times with, like, you know, wanting to pick up new stuff and the sort of like pull and push between your TBR goals and the new stuff that is being thrown your way. But so yeah, I think I'm gonna end this video here. There's no real conclusion to this, except as I said, that currently I'm working towards reducing to under 20, and we'll take it from there. But so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!